Imagine stepping into an arena with thousands of eyes fixed upon you. With each step, death could be lurking in the shadows. Now, imagine doing this 15 times and surviving. This is the story of Atticus, the Retiarius gladiator who not only fought but conquered his freedom. At the height of the Roman Empire, during Emperor Trajan's reign between 98 and 117 after Christ, gladiators were both the heroes and villains of the arena. Among them, Atticus distinguished himself as a Retiarius, a fighter armed with a net and trident, renowned for his agility and strategy. His story, however, extends far beyond his combats. He stands among the few gladiators who achieved the most coveted prize: freedom. The life of a gladiator was brutal and often brief. Most died in their first few matches, their names forgotten to history. But not Atticus. His name echoed through the Colosseum as crowds chanted for the man who turned combat into an art form. With each victory, his legend grew. Did you know that Retiarius gladiators were considered the most vulnerable yet tactically sophisticated fighters? Unlike their heavily armored counterparts, they relied entirely on speed, precision, and timing. One mistake meant certain death. Atticus mastered this deadly dance 15 times. 15 times he faced opponents determined to spill his blood on the sand. 15 times he walked away, sometimes bloodied, but always alive. In an era where entertainment meant death, Atticus defied the odds. If you love stories of courage, strategy, and triumph over impossible odds, like this video, subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel and don't miss a single episode. Join us as we uncover the remarkable journey of one man who refused to die for Rome's entertainment and instead fought his way to freedom. Before the roars of the crowd and the blood-stained sand, Atticus was just an ordinary man. Born in a coastal village in what we now call Greece, he lived a simple life as a fisherman. His skilled hands, which would later wield the trident with deadly precision, once only pulled nets full of fish from the Mediterranean waters. But fate can turn in an instant. During Emperor Trajan's military campaigns to expand Rome's eastern borders around 105 after Christ, Atticus's village stood in the path of the advancing legions. When they refused to surrender, the consequences were swift and merciless. Those who survived the initial attack, including Atticus, were captured and enslaved. Like many prisoners of war, Atticus faced a grim choice: hard labor in the mines where few survived beyond a year, or the chance to fight as a gladiator. For a man who had already shown resilience and physical strength, the decision was clear, though hardly a choice at all. Atticus was sold to a lanista, a gladiator trainer who saw potential in the fisherman's agile movements and familiarity with nets. He was sent to a ludus, a gladiatorial school near Rome, where his true transformation began. The once free man entered the school in chains, stripped of his identity, given a new name, and forced to swear the gladiator's oath: "I will endure to be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword." Daily training was brutal and unforgiving. Dawn to dusk, Atticus learned to fight with wooden weapons twice as heavy as those used in actual combat. His body, already hardened by years of fishing, was pushed beyond limits he never knew existed. Many didn't survive the training. Exhaustion, injuries, and disease claimed those too weak to endure. The trainers quickly recognized Atticus's natural agility and decided his skills would be best suited to becoming a Retiarius, a net fighter. This was one of the most technically challenging and dangerous types of gladiator. Unlike heavily armored fighters, the Retiarius wore minimal protection. No helmet, just a shoulder guard called a gallerus on the left arm, and fabric wrappings on the legs. Their primary weapons were a weighted net for entangling opponents, a trident for striking and keeping enemies at bay, and a small dagger for close combat. What few people realize is that becoming a Retiarius was often considered a punishment or humiliation. They were the lowest class of gladiator, symbolically representing fishermen hunting swordfish. Yet in Atticus's hands, this perceived disadvantage would become his greatest strength. His years casting fishing nets had prepared him for the precise movements needed to ensnare opponents. For 3 years, Atticus trained, learning not just to fight, but to survive. He watched as fellow trainees died in practice or were executed for disobedience. He endured beatings, starvation, and constant psychological torment designed to either break his spirit or forge him into a living weapon. And all the while, a fire burned inside him, not just to survive, but someday to win back what had been stolen from him, his freedom. While most gladiators relied on brute strength and heavy armor, the Retiarius was truly the artist of the arena. Imagine Atticus stepping onto the hot sand wearing almost nothing, just a linen loincloth, a metal shoulder guard called a gallerus on his left arm, and cloth wrappings to protect his legs. No helmet to shield his face, no breastplate to guard his heart. Every expression, every emotion was visible to the crowd. In one hand, he carried a weighted net with lead sinkers along its edges, the signature weapon that gave the Retiarius his name, which means netman in Latin. In his other hand, a trident taller than a man, capable of keeping opponents at bay or delivering fatal strikes through gaps in armor. And strapped to his belt, a small dagger for close combat, a last resort when all else failed. This minimal equipment allowed Atticus to move with a grace that heavily armored gladiators could only envy. He could spin, leap, and change direction in an instant. Romans didn't just come to see blood, they came to witness the deadly dance of the Retiarius, a performance as much as a fight. The Retiarius never stood still. Atticus would circle his opponents, usually a heavily armored secutor or murmillo, looking for an opportunity to strike. The secutor, whose name means pursuer, was specifically designed to fight the Retiarius. With a smooth helmet that offered no edges for a net to catch and a curved shield to deflect the trident strikes, these opponents were Atticus's perfect foil. What made Atticus exceptional was his timing. He knew precisely when to cast his net. Not too early, not too late. If he missed, he would be temporarily disarmed and vulnerable. But when successful, the weighted net would entangle his opponent's weapon, shield, or even their entire body, rendering them helpless against his trident. One fascinating aspect of these matches was their theatrical nature. The Retiarius fights were often themed around Neptune, god of the sea, hunting down a land-dwelling warrior. The crowd understood this symbolism, adding another layer of entertainment to the brutal spectacle. Some Retiarii even wore elaborate tunics decorated with sea motifs to enhance this connection. Did you know that Retiarius fighters often fought in the morning or early afternoon? Their matches were considered lighter entertainment before the main events later in the day. Yet Atticus transformed what many considered a lesser class of gladiator into something extraordinary. His fights became so popular that they were sometimes scheduled during the prime afternoon hours, usually reserved for the most prestigious gladiatorial classes. Atticus elevated the Retiarius fighting style to an art form. Where others saw disadvantage in the lack of armor and defensive capability, he saw opportunity for speed and unpredictability. His body became a weapon itself, ducking, weaving, and striking with the precision of a predator. But perhaps what truly made him remarkable was his showmanship. Atticus understood that survival in the arena wasn't just about winning, it was about entertaining the crowd. He would perform especially daring moves, deliberately allowing his opponents to come within inches of striking him before escaping with a graceful sidestep that left the audience gasping and cheering. In the bloody theater of the Colosseum, Atticus wasn't just fighting for his life, he was creating art with every movement, painting with the crimson palette of combat, his canvas the golden sand of the arena. 15 times Atticus stepped into the arena, 15 times he faced death. 15 times he walked away while others did not. Each combat was recorded on stone tablets by arena officials, a testament to his extraordinary survival in a profession where most men died in their first or second match. His first fight was nearly his last. Inexperienced and terrified, Atticus faced a veteran Mamillo named Cassius. The crowd expected a quick slaughter of the new Retiarius. But something unexpected happened that day. When Cassius charged, Atticus didn't retreat as expected. Instead, he sidestepped at the last possible moment and cast his net with perfect timing, entangling Cassius's sword arm. The stunned silence that followed erupted into cheers as Atticus claimed his first victory. By his fifth combat, Atticus had developed a reputation. Emperor Trajan himself was said to have attended this match, curious about the Retiarius who kept defying the odds. This time, Atticus faced two opponents consecutively, a test of endurance few gladiators survived. First came a Thraex fighter with his curved sword, followed by a Hoplomachus with spear and small round shield. Exhausted after defeating the first opponent, Atticus still managed to outmaneuver the second, collapsing from exhaustion only after his victory was secured. His 10th fight occurred during the celebrations of Trajan's Dacian conquest in 106 after Christ. It was here that Atticus faced his most formidable opponent, Maximus, a secutor whose reputation for killing Retiarii had earned him the nickname Net Cutter. Standing nearly 7 feet tall and clad in gleaming armor, Maximus entered the arena to thunderous applause. What followed was perhaps the most extraordinary display of gladiatorial combat witnessed during Trajan's reign. For nearly an hour, the two men circled each other in the deadly dance of combat. Twice Atticus cast his net and missed. Twice he narrowly escaped death. The crowd grew restless, some calling for both men to attack more aggressively. Then came the moment that would be immortalized in a mosaic still visible in the ruins of a Pompeii villa. Atticus feigned a stumble, deliberately appearing vulnerable. When Maximus lunged forward for the kill, Atticus revealed his true intention. A perfect cast of the net that ensnared not just Maximus's sword arm, but his helmet as well, momentarily blinding him. In that crucial moment, Atticus struck with his trident, not for a killing blow, but to force Maximus to his knees. With his opponent subdued, Atticus looked to the imperial box for judgment. Emperor Trajan, impressed by both men's skill, signaled for Maximus to be spared. Both gladiators left the arena alive that day, a rare outcome that added to the legend of Atticus. His 14th combat nearly ended his streak. A younger, faster Retiarius named Titus had studied Atticus's techniques and came prepared with counter-strategies. Midway through the fight, Titus caught Atticus with a slashing attack that opened a deep wound on his thigh. Blood soaking the sand, Atticus fought through the pain. When his strength began to fail, he gambled everything on a desperate move, throwing his trident directly at Titus, something rarely done as it left the Retiarius with only a dagger. The unexpected tactic worked. The trident struck Titus's shoulder, not killing him, but creating the opening Atticus needed to close the distance and force his surrender. His 15th and final combat would prove to be his most famous. Facing the champion secutor Flamma, a gladiator who had won 21 combats, Atticus entered the arena as the underdog. What made this fight legendary wasn't just its outcome but its circumstances. It occurred during the Vulcanalia festival, held in honor of Vulcan, god of fire. As was tradition during this festival, the arena was ringed with ceremonial flames. The heat was oppressive, a disadvantage for the heavily armored Flamma. Atticus used this to his advantage, drawing out the fight, forcing his opponent to chase him through the sweltering arena. When Flamma's movements finally slowed from heat exhaustion, Atticus struck, his net ensnaring Flamma's legs, bringing the champion crashing down. With his trident at Flamma's throat, Atticus had won his most significant victory. It was after this 15th triumph that Atticus received what few gladiators ever lived to see, the wooden sword of freedom, presented by the emperor himself. So, did you know that Retiarii were considered the most theatrical of all gladiators? Their fighting style was as much about performance as combat, creating a spectacle that captivated Roman audiences. If you're enjoying this video, please like, share, and subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel for more incredible stories from history. And tell us in the comments, do you think Atticus was a hero or merely a survivor who did what he had to do? Freedom. The word itself carries power, but for a gladiator it was more than a word. It was the impossible dream. Of the thousands who fought in the arenas across the Roman Empire, only a tiny fraction ever lived to see this dream realized. Atticus was one of those rare few. After his 15th victory, as the roar of the crowd still echoed through the Colosseum, something extraordinary happened. Emperor Trajan himself rose from his imperial box. The arena fell silent. In his hand, he held a simple wooden sword, the rudis. This unassuming object, crafted from olive wood and lacking any ornamentation, was more valuable to a gladiator than all the gold in Rome. The rudis symbolized not just freedom from the arena, but rebirth as a citizen. When Trajan presented this wooden sword to Atticus, he wasn't just rewarding a successful fighter, he was acknowledging a man who had proven himself worthy of rejoining society. The ceremony itself was steeped in ritual and symbolism. Atticus knelt before the emperor, his head bowed. Blood still dripped from minor wounds, mixing with the sand beneath him. As Trajan placed the rudis in his hands, the imperial herald proclaimed in a booming voice, "This man, once condemned to the arena, has earned his freedom through courage and skill. From this day forward, he shall be known as a Retiarius, a free man." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some cheered wildly. Atticus had become a favorite over the years, and many were genuinely happy to see him survive. Others booed and jeered, disappointed to lose such an entertaining fighter. This tension between celebrating a man's freedom and mourning the loss of a spectacle perfectly captured the complex moral contradictions of Roman society. What many people don't realize is just how rare this achievement was. Historical records suggest that fewer than 1 in 20 gladiators ever received the rudis. Most died in the arena, others from injuries or disease in the gladiatorial barracks. Some served their entire careers without ever earning freedom. For Atticus to achieve this after 15 fights was remarkable. Most Retiarii had fought 20 or 30 times before earning their wooden sword. The freedom granted to Atticus came with certain conditions. Like all freed gladiators, he became a libatus, a freedman with limitations on his rights. He could never hold political office or marry into aristocratic families. He would always carry the stigma of having been both a slave and a gladiator. But compared to the life he had escaped, these restrictions meant little. Another fascinating aspect of the rudis ceremony was its religious dimension. Before receiving his wooden sword, Atticus had to make offerings at the temple of Nemesis, the goddess of divine retribution, who was particularly associated with gladiators. They believed she controlled their fate in the arena, and no gladiator would dare receive his freedom without properly thanking her first. Did you know that retired gladiators often wore their rudis as a pendant or kept it prominently displayed in their homes? It served as proof of their status as free men and a reminder of what they had survived. Some Retiarii would touch their wooden swords before making important decisions, believing it brought the favor of the gods who had spared them in the arena. For Atticus, the rudis represented more than just his own personal freedom. It was vindication. From the moment he was captured and enslaved, he had been treated as less than human, a piece of property, then a weapon, and finally an entertainment. The wooden sword restored his humanity in the eyes of Roman law. And here's another remarkable fact. Some freed gladiators actually chose to return to the arena voluntarily. The fame, the adoration of the crowd, and the substantial payment offered to free gladiators proved too tempting. But not for Atticus. Having faced death 15 times, he had no desire to tempt fate again. His wooden sword was not just a symbol of freedom gained, but of wisdom earned. As he walked out of the Colosseum that day, no longer a gladiator but a free man, Atticus carried with him not just a wooden sword, but something far more precious, a future of his own choosing. What happens when a man who has known nothing but violence and spectacle for years suddenly finds himself free? For Atticus, life after the arena began with uncertainty. The wooden sword had given him legal freedom, but not direction. History falls silent on the exact path Atticus took after receiving his rudies, but we can piece together his likely fate based on what we know about other Retiari, freed gladiators, during Emperor Trajan's reign between 98 and 117 after Christ. Many former gladiators with Atticus's reputation found themselves in high demand as trainers. The same Lanista who once owned him might have offered Atticus a position at his ludus. As a doctor, a gladiatorial instructor, Atticus could have commanded considerable respect and payment. His expertise as a Retiarius would have been particularly valued, as few who specialized in this difficult fighting style lived long enough to teach it. Imagine Atticus returning to the same training grounds where he once suffered as a slave, now walking freely among the buildings as a respected teacher. The new recruits would whisper as he passed, "That's Atticus, the one who survived 15 combats." Young fighters would compete for his attention, hoping to learn the secrets that had kept him alive when so many others had fallen. Another intriguing possibility lies in what Roman historians tell us about popular freed gladiators. Some became bodyguards for wealthy Romans. The elite of society, who had once cheered for Atticus from comfortable seats in the Colosseum, might now have paid handsomely for his protection. There's a delicious irony in a man once forced to fight for others' entertainment, later being paid to ensure their safety. What many people don't realize is that some freed gladiators actually became quite wealthy. Their fame opened doors that would normally be closed to former slaves. A popular theory among historians suggests that Atticus may have used his connections to enter the lucrative wine trade between Rome and the eastern provinces. His Greek origins would have given him valuable knowledge of eastern markets, while his gladiatorial fame would have opened doors with Roman merchants. A fascinating inscription discovered near Ostia, Rome's ancient port, mentions an Atticus, formerly of the arena, who owned a warehouse for imported goods. Could this be our Atticus? The timing matches his active period, and the career would have suited a shrewd survivor who understood both combat and commerce. Some freed gladiators even married into respectable families. While Roman law prevented former slaves from marrying into the senatorial class, marriages to merchant families were not uncommon. Perhaps Atticus found not just freedom, but family as well, finally experiencing the normal life that had been stolen from him when he was captured. Whatever path he chose, we know that Atticus had one advantage many other freed gladiators lacked. He had left the arena on his own terms, with his body relatively intact. Many Retiari suffered from debilitating injuries that limited their options. A famous mosaic from Trajan's time shows a retired gladiator walking with a cane, his fighting days evident in his broken posture. Atticus, having survived through skill rather than merely absorbing punishment, likely avoided this fate. Did you know that freed gladiators often formed social clubs called collegia? These organizations functioned as support networks, helping former arena fighters adjust to civilian life. They pooled resources to ensure proper burials for members, celebrated holidays together, and sometimes even engaged in local politics as a voting bloc. Perhaps Atticus found community among these men who alone could understand what he had experienced. Most poignantly, some historical records suggest that freed gladiators occasionally returned to visit the arena, not to fight, but to watch. Can you imagine Atticus sitting in the stands, observing younger men fight as he once did? Would he have felt relief, nostalgia, or perhaps a complex mixture of emotions that only those who have faced death repeatedly could understand. What makes Atticus's story so compelling isn't just his survival against overwhelming odds, but what that survival represents. In an empire built on rigid social hierarchies, where fate seemed predetermined by birth, his journey from captured fisherman to slave to celebrated gladiator to free man demonstrates that courage, skill, and perhaps a touch of fortune could indeed change destinies. Atticus vanishes from historical records after his freedom, but in that disappearance lies perhaps the greatest victory of all, the right to live quietly, to fade from public view, to no longer be entertainment, but simply to be human. Atticus was more than just a gladiator. He was a living testament to the indomitable human spirit. From a simple fisherman to enslaved warrior to free man, his journey spanned the entire spectrum of human experience in the ancient world. While emperors and senators are remembered in our history books, it's the story of men like Atticus that truly reveals the soul of Rome. Think about what his accomplishments meant in their time. In an empire where slaves were considered property, where human life was expendable entertainment, Atticus refused to become just another bloodstain on the sand. He transformed the very chains that bound him into the keys to his freedom. The wooden sword he earned, this simple rudis, represented something profound, that even in a world of rigid hierarchy and cruel spectacle, individual courage could change one's stars. For every Atticus whose name survived in fragmentary records, hundreds more lived, fought, and died anonymously. How many other extraordinary stories of resilience have been lost to time? How many other slaves, gladiators, and ordinary people defied their circumstances only to have history forget their names? This is perhaps why the tale of Atticus resonates so deeply with us, nearly 2,000 years later. His struggles, though set amid the exotic backdrop of ancient Rome, speak to universal human experiences. Captivity and freedom, despair and hope, the fight not just to survive, but to truly live. Emperor Trajan's Rome eventually fell, as all empires do. The Colosseum where Atticus fought stands in ruins. The crowds who cheered his name are long forgotten. Yet the essence of his story, that courage, skill, and determination can overcome seemingly impossible odds, remains as powerful today as it was when he cast his net for the final time. One of the most remarkable aspects of Roman history is how it continues to mirror our own society. Our fascination with celebrities, our complex relationship with violence as entertainment, our struggles with social mobility. By understanding men like Atticus, we better understand ourselves. If you've enjoyed this journey back to the blood-soaked sands of the Roman arena, please like this video and share it with friends who appreciate these hidden chapters of history. Subscribe to the Legacy of Empires channel to explore more extraordinary stories from ancient civilizations, tales of courage, conquest, innovation, and intrigue that shaped our world. From the rise and fall of emperors to the lives of everyday Romans, from massive architectural wonders to intimate personal struggles, we're dedicated to bringing the ancient world to life. What ancient figure would you like to learn about next? Let us know in the comments below. Until our next historical adventure, remember the lesson of Atticus. No circumstance, no matter how dire, completely determines your fate. With courage, strategy, and perhaps a bit of fortune, even the most desperate situation can be overcome. This is Legacy of Empires, where history lives again. Until next time.